So this week I'm delighted to invite you, Maneesh, and to have you as a guest, but I'm going to call you MJ because that's what we all call you, don't we, now that we know you?
Yeah, it's much easier as well to call me MJ.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I've got a very long name too, and I shorten it to Maria. So anybody that's name begins with M and they reduce it, that I get them. So MJ, let's go back to the beginning. You've gone on a very interesting journey. Why do you think you've ended on the path that you're on?
Well, a couple of reasons. I think I've only started to reflect upon it recently that I've inherited some germs probably from my parents in terms of what they did when they were working. So my mother worked in administration in the NHS, and my father worked as a lecturer in statistics in the university teaching students. So I have that I've grown up with that's been influencing my thoughts that I've grown up to this. And then I've ended up working within health and data now, largely for my career, albeit I did work I did manage the Tesco club card database for 2 years before I entered the world of pharmaceuticals. But the whole point is it's about, I've been using data to drive decision making and most recently to improve people's health. Just using data. So I just think all of that put together and just the curiosity about again, before even people got excited about big data, I was working with really massive data sets, and it was a pretty sort of geeky profession and wasn't as famous as it is now.
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned the Tesco card, and of course that was DunnHumby and DunnHumby, and he said data is the new oil. I mean, that was 12 years ago that he said that. Is it still the oil of and how powerful is data still today?
Well, it's still extremely powerful, and remember that ultimately how data is used in terms of artificial intelligence and these algorithms that are shaping these decisions in society. So whether it's the data that a bank uses to assess whether they should give you a mortgage or not, or the data that is used to help a doctor establish should they give you drug A or drug B. So data is actually very important, but people are paying more attention to the algorithms and sort of the software itself rather than thinking about really boring things like, are we sure that this data that we're using in the AI is accurate? Is it complete? Is it representative? And a lot of the time, the data is sitting in different parts of an organization. So maybe marketing has got some data, sales has got some data. They're not talking to each other because they're in siloed functions. And so often there are basic things that can be done just with data, even without spending a lot of money, just to link things up, to clean the data. And in fact, there were these 21 jobs of the future. There was a report recently, and I was reading one of the job titles they proposed for the next 5 years is data trash engineer. What does that mean? Turning trash into treasure, meaning taking all these kind of like substandard data sets around an organization and actually linking them together, cleaning them, cleansing them, transforming them so that actually these algorithms can run better and more effectively on these data sets. And so you're turning that trash into treasure as an engineer.
Well, I love that, data trash engineer. How that on a CV is like, wow, what a great job title. I like that. So much of your work has been focused really in healthcare and how technology is helping healthcare move out of hospitals and actually to anywhere, into the home, into hotels, into wherever you happen to be. What's happening already in that space? What technologies are out there to help us move out of the hospital? What are you seeing? What's coming next?
Well, already what's out there is in terms of, so we have to separate it into, there are products out there, Maria, that are basically just consumer wellness devices. So they're not clinically validated. You can't necessarily trust or rely upon them. So those are things like Fitbits, etc. you might wear to track how much you're walking or how much you're sleeping. But then you have the other section in terms of specifically to healthcare. So you have devices, medical devices that have been approved by the regulators, they're clinically validated, so they're safe and trusted. For example, Apple recently have announced that with their Apple Watch, you can basically take an electrocardiogram or a certain type of electrocardiogram using your Apple Watch without a cardiologist needed, to tell you have an abnormal rhythm or not. It doesn't diagnose you, it doesn't replace going to the hospital, but it just means certain situations certain tests you can do now from anywhere you like, just with a device you can buy from a company like Apple. But in terms of what's coming next, so you have, for example, do you personally use anything like an Amazon Echo or a Google Home?
It's very careful you said that, because I actually used the name Echo as my wake word, and she's sitting behind me. I've got one upstairs here in my office, and I've got one downstairs, and I've had to give them separate names because I haven't linked them up. I don't want them to sync. And sometimes I'll be downstairs and I'll use one name and they both answer me, or the wrong one. But yes, I'm addicted to these things, yes.
So going back to moving healthcare out of the home, so this is early research yet, so it's not turned into a real product, but researchers are looking at whether they can analyze the voice data either from your smartphone or even you speaking to your Amazon Echo, and potentially use that voice data to determine is that person showing early signs of Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's, just from some snippet of voice data, right? So think how powerful that might be for early detection of certain diseases, just by people having a conversation and asking the smart speaker for the weather, right? That's one aspect. Another thing that's really interesting from a health perspective, again, going back to voice data, is that they're anticipating that just in a few years' time, you'll be able to speak to your car, to your smart speaker, and in that conversation, the AI in that assistant would be able to detect whether you're feeling sad, whether you're feeling happy, whether you're feeling stressed or tired, and respond accordingly. So imagine again, so BMW are launching a new AI personal assistant for their cars early next year. And if you look at the video, the driver says, I'm stressed or I'm tired, and the car plays relaxing music, changes the ambient lighting. But can you imagine a world where, in a few years' time, it becomes so advanced, you speak to your car and you say, I'm stressed, and it says, hey, how about I play some meditation music and we do some guided meditation together. And you think again about, suddenly that means that you've got a whole bunch of companies that weren't in the health and well-being space that may suddenly find themselves in the health and well-being space, because technology is allowing them to understand and almost build an emotional relationship with the customer. In this case, the car, it might be your fridge, it might be your smart speaker, it might even be you talking to, your home in general.
I talk to myself actually in my home, so I'll end up with my fridge responding and that kind of, that's. But does that not take us away more and more from having relationships with people if machines are going to be replacing those relationships? Normally, if you're feeling a bit upset or a bit sad, you might go and talk to a friend or a partner. If you're going to talk to your car or your kettle, does that not change our human relationships?
Absolutely, Maria. But conversely, it may be that research has shown that some people actually prefer sharing how they're feeling, especially when it comes to mental health or sexual health, with a machine, right, rather than a human being, i.e. a professional psychiatrist, etc. Why is that? When they probe these people in the survey who had answered, it's because maybe they think the machine is not going to judge them. And maybe some people prefer dealing with a machine because they don't like making eye contact with somebody and talking about sexual health, for example. But also it comes down to dignity. There was another piece of research I read about robots and elderly people, right? And so most people say, well, I don't want a robot to care for me when I get old. I want a real human being who's going to come in and look at me and make eye contact and sort of have that compassion and empathy only a human carer can have. But this elderly person in the survey said, right, the reason I would prefer a care robot at certain times of the day is for dignity. For example, when I'm really, really old and infirm and I need help dressing and getting in the shower, at that point when I'm naked, I'd prefer a care robot to be handing me the towel than a human carer who's going to say, look at your wrinkly old body, right? So again, it's really interesting that it's not, I don't think it's the issue is binary, but equally, I do think that as today's generation growing up right now, who are 5 or even younger than that, 5 years old, they're growing up and they're finding they're talking to AI assistants, they're using chatbots without any fear whatsoever of privacy and where the data is going and how how it impacts society. So I think for the future, this younger generation, who are these digital natives who are growing up and quite comfortable, what will they expect? Will their expectations be different from healthcare, from healthcare professionals, from in terms of where they find guidance and wisdom and help in society generally? Do they turn to these machines first rather than a friend, their spouse, their parents, their family, a trusted professional? You know, I just think that's a really fascinating topic to explore, which is part of my research as well, how that is going to shape actually society in general, in terms of who do we trust and when do we trust them, and what does it take to trust a machine? What does it take to trust a human being?
That's fascinating stuff, really fascinating. So, you know, when I was first thinking about asking you about some of these things, I thought, oh, I don't know, I don't like the idea of having a robot. But actually now I'm getting it. You're right about the certain elements and the dignity part. So how soon are these coming? Because I don't have much longer before I'm old and infirm. So how far away are these caring robots?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's going to be literally, I don't think there's going to be a certain point in time when suddenly we will go from all these AI assistants and robots being fairly dumb and clunky and crude in their operation to suddenly they'll be able to just make us a cup of tea and boil an egg, for example. I think it's going to be gradual, and it's more they're going to start off so rather than actually a robot nurse coming in and lifting you off the bed and washing your hair, for example, because you're 85 years old and you can't do it on your own. I think it's going to be gradual, and it's going to start off more in the companionship, where it might be, you know, like, so for example, already people are suggesting that in order to combat loneliness amongst really old people who are living alone, we give them one of these smart speakers to keep them company, remind them to take their medications, entertain them. And so I think it's going to come like that. Slowly, we're going to see this gradual shift to a point where maybe in 20 years' time, it might feel quite normal that we could just, as an adult who's got a grandparent or a parent who's aging and living 500 miles away, and it's difficult to see them, that we say, actually, for peace of mind, we're going to order them a bunch of care robots in the home. Again, I think that's perfectly feasible within 20 years' time.
Okay, fantastic. So you touched upon mental health and the importance of you know, a voice recognition device being able to maybe sense if something's you know, a concern. Do you think that we'll be able to use technology to prevent disease in other areas, not only mental health? Is there other things going on?
Absolutely. So in terms of prevention, we've known about certain risk factors, like if you eat too much, or if you're drinking too much, if you're not active enough. And these are risk factors in terms of certain diseases, diabetes, certain types of cancer, heart disease, hypertension. So again, in terms of, again, helping consumers make informed choices, these technologies and what I call leading to digital nudges, where, again, going back to the fridge example, how would you feel, and this is a scenario that from Samsung have put forward with their technology, that, you know, their Samsung wearable tracks how much you're walking, for example. Even when you take pictures of your food with your Samsung phone, the AI recognizes you're eating a portion of macaroni cheese and it's 500 calories and X grams of fat. And then when you go home to your Samsung fridge, it then takes the information from your wearable, the fact that you've taken photos with your Samsung food of your, etc. And then your Samsung fridge knows what's in the fridge and then works out, actually, Maria, you have 400 calories left to eat as part of your daily target. I suggest you make yourself a kale and beetroot sandwich, right? I mean, how do you feel about that level of digital nudging, where in order for us to prevent disease in a much more systematic way across society and save the healthcare system money and help people live healthier lives, we have to have these machines around us collecting information on our habits, our behavior, our intentions, our goals. And then basically at every decision point we have in our daily lives, we have a machine telling us, hey, Maria, this is the optimum choice for you now. And if you think about who's going to enforce this, it could be your employer, your spouse, your insurer, who says, actually, if you don't follow this machine's optimum choice right now, then your health insurance premium is going to go up, or, you know, your employer or your manager is going to know that you're consistently drinking too much, even though the technology is saying to you, hey, you know, don't have that, so many glasses of wine. And again, it almost feels to me that there's a fine balance between, yes, we want to create a society where people can live their healthiest lives possible and keep them out of hospital, right? We don't want them on drugs and having procedures and surgeries. However, when it comes to these risk factors and these digital nudges, what would it take the joy out of being human that, my wearable bracelet, I'm at your birthday party, say in a few years' time, we're sitting in a pub and I'm having one drink too many, for example, based upon the number of units I'm supposed to consume, and my wearable says, hey Maneesh, you sure you want that beer? You're going to go over your daily intake guidelines,
Well, there's danger in that as well, though, because I mean, I've got one of those wearables. We won't mention names, we won't advertise. Mind you, we probably will later because I'm going to drop a couple of gadgets I like. And I actually stopped wearing it because it kept telling me how badly I was sleeping. And because it kept telling me how badly I was sleeping, I was getting more and more stressed about my bad sleep. And I thought, I can't wear this at night. So I just took it off. So, if it's going to tell me stop having that glass of wine, I'll just take it off.
Absolutely. It's a bit like, for example, I find, with response to your statement there, so I think what's needed is that instead of, as a consumer, you're leading a busy life, instead of just giving you data, what you need are insights that you can act upon. So, for example, if everything in this world were integrated together, Maria, what would happen is that your wearable might say, hey, Maria, I've noticed that you slept worse or badly last night. You didn't have enough deep sleep. I think it's because there was your bedroom was very cold between midnight and 4 a.m. right, and so it was actually I worked out that it was 12 degrees Celsius. So then it gives you something to act upon, and maybe you have a draft, or a window was left open when you went to bed, etc. So now you can act upon that. So that's what's needed in order for us to say, okay, I'm not just getting a piece of data saying you've walked 15,000 steps. I'm getting insights I can actually act upon and do something, right? Or it might be that even potentially, in the same way some of these modern cars are turning around and saying, the cars can monitor when your brake pads are low, for example, and automatically communicate with the dealer and say, hey, it's time to book your car in for service and replace brake pads. What if potentially, if your bed and the mattress is wearing out, it sends a signal and you get a message from a bed store saying, hey, Maria, your bed has told us it's wearing out. How about you come in and try some new beds out?
Gosh, wow, what a world. So I met somebody at a conference last week who'd actually had a chip inserted inside his body. So he's not wearing the technology, he's actually got it inside him. I mean, have you gone that far?
I haven't gone that far. I believe those are RFID chips where you can put them here.
Yes.
And it allows you then to do things like you can unlock a door, for example. And I haven't gone that far. But what I've noticed is that, so wearables, in my opinion, are a transition technology. So ultimately, it would be, we potentially may move to ingestibles, where we ingest a sensor or a chip. So you've already got that in the terms of, so there's a big challenge in healthcare that medicines obviously are very expensive, and people forget to take their medication. They don't want to take the medication. So there are already now products on the market where you actually have a chip inside your medicine, inside your tablet. And when you swallow that pill, it actually sends, when you've actually swallowed it, it sends a signal up to the cloud. So your doctor or your insurer or whoever can check, okay, Maria has taken this pill at this time of day. So in terms of making sure and being able to check remotely, has somebody taken their medication or not? So that kind of technology is already here. Some people fear it might lead to biomedical big brother and what have you. But again, I think it's only a matter of time before, even, for example, there was an airline, a big airline, and they had filed a patent where they were looking at how can we find ways to improve people's flying experience so it's better from a well-being perspective. So they were considering, just a patent, it's not a commercial product, when you board the plane, you swallow a digital pill and it monitors your stomach acid and your digestive health, and then it sends data to the cabin crew, who then remotely in the galley can go, oh, that person in seat 2F, it looks like they're having digestive issues, let's go and take them a cup of peppermint tea.
Oh dear, I'm not sure about all this. It's all a bit scary. I mean, you remain very open-minded to all this crazy stuff that goes on. Why are you so open-minded? What is in your personality?
I think I'm open-minded because I realized that having met so many people, heard their challenges around the world. I've been to 48 countries now, and you meet people from all walks of life, and you realize that there are so many problems out there, really, really big problems, whether it's caring for people living with dementia, whether it's detecting certain diseases early, whether it's reducing the cost of care, making access to medicines easier, and improving the safety of healthcare. You look at all of that and I'm thinking, well, we have to remain open-minded, because ultimately all of these technologies, whatever labels they have on them, whether it was the horse and cart several hundred years ago, whether it's AI today, these are tools that we can decide together as a group of people in society, how should we leverage them for benefit in society? And how should we use them in our organization to improve decision making, improve profitability, make our products safer for customers to use? And that's why I think it's really important to not jump to conclusions too quickly and write off a piece of technology and say, this is scary, so I'm not even going to consider it at all. I'm just going to park it over there because it's too scary.
Well, I'm glad you're doing this job and I'm not, because I get very easily spooked these days and get a bit scared. So you've said you've talked in 48 countries.
No,
I know.
I've traveled to 48.
Oh, travel to. Okay. Well, but I think your ambition is to travel to 100 countries. Is that right?
Yes, there's a club apparently, I think in the US, called the Centenary Club, where membership is allowed once you've proved that you've been to 100 countries at least. So that's my target.
That's your target. Okay, let's see if we can all make it happen. So if there's anybody out there that wants to invite MJ to come and visit them, and you're in somewhere very remote that you might not have been to, you're up for that. And but let's talk about your speaking. So I mentioned talking, so let's talk about speaking. You've been speaking for some time now, and in fact you've given 4 TEDx talks, and you've been around the world. What are clients coming to you and asking you for specifically to say? What is it that they're wanting to hear from you?
Okay. In essence, they're generally coming to me with a number of questions and needs. But one of the most critical ones is when it comes to giving a keynote about digital health and health tech is, we're reading so much in the news, we're confused, and there seems to be innovation from China and India and America, and there seems to be, do we seek innovation from startups, and how do we incubate innovation in our own organization, or do we buy a company, and should we be embracing this, or should we be running away from it, and when should we adopt it? But generally these questions are all relating to the future seems increasingly uncertain, the pace of change seems increasingly rapid. People are coming to us offering us solutions for $1 million, $2 million. We've got finite resources. We're under pressure to deliver more profitability, more sales with less people, with less products, with less R&D budget, with less money for innovation. Maneesh, how do we navigate this uncertain future? Basically, give us some insights that allow us to find signal within the noise. And you're sitting there reading 200 articles every morning and then curating content and then tweeting out there and meeting people from around the world. Help us figure out what this means for our leadership team, not just our leadership team. What does it mean for our organization? What should we be training people on? What should we be shifting people's priorities to? And ultimately, I think the really big question at the back of their minds is, and this applies to any sector right now because technology is disrupting so much, how do we stay relevant to our customers' lives over the next 10, 20, 30 years? So, because ultimately, for a lot of people, not just in healthcare, because the way that people have basically been making money in business the same way for the last 100 years, those business models are starting to come to be eroded and decimated very quickly. Software, data, AI, all these new things. And see people are sitting there, whether they're a car company, a pharmaceutical company, whoever it is, saying like, well, we've made money this way for the same years and we just tweak the business model here and there. And suddenly we're finding that we don't feel that we can survive and prosper by doing things the same way we've always done them. But we don't know what these new business models will be. So we just need somebody to help us understand what these range of scenarios might be.
Fantastic. And that's that nugget you said there about how do we stay relevant, that is so important. That's just brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. So you mentioned cars, and I know that you're a bit of a petrol head, but I also know, because there's yourself, there's me, and there's Dominic on my team. We've all signed up, we've all what's the word I'm looking for? We've all reserved our Tesla 3, but I think you're the only one who's actually seen one in the flesh, I think. Is that right?
And I've test driven one, yes.
You've test driven it? Oh, tell me all about my new car. What's it like?
Well, it certainly feels like something very different. It's really strange to be driving along and accelerating very rapidly with virtually no noise whatsoever, and just not having this traditional user interface and just having this big screen in the middle. It looks like somebody's plonked an iPad in the middle of the dashboard. But it's also really bizarre as well, because I still, I'm so used to, I'm a tactile person, so I'm so used to interfacing with technology by, turning the volume up by doing this, or adjusting where the flow of the ventilation should be by opening or closing the vent, right? And suddenly this is all through the touch screen, right? And this is really strange when you first sit in the car, but you do get used to it, but it is still, sort of a strange experience. But it's also just when you test drive the Tesla Model 3, I've driven all of the Teslas, but when you actually just think about, again, when you look at the other car companies and they're looking at the pace of change with Tesla and saying, well, we've got factories that we've invested in, we've got logistics supply chain about getting exhaust components and getting spark plugs and getting this, and suddenly, well, if we do move to how quickly can we move to cars that are electric, because it means that everything we've got right now, entire infrastructure of the organization, is not built around that. It's built around internal combustion engines. So again, I just find that fascinating when it comes to from the automotive industry's perspective. This is only what's here today. So if we think about what's coming in the future and what will it mean, sometimes it boggles the mind how fast this is changing.
But I have to ask you here on a personal note, because you are a petrol head and you love cars. Are you still going to have a petrol car as well as your Tesla, or have you been totally converted?
So it's a gradual shift. So as an early adopter, a few years ago, I went from a petrol car to a petrol hybrid, a Toyota Prius. And then I decided, okay, actually, I don't want to get an electric car just yet because they're very experimental in the technology. So I'm going to go with a halfway house. So I've got a Mercedes plug-in hybrid now, which has a very small battery, and I can plug it in for urban use, for example. And then my plan is that when Tesla Model 3 arrives, then I would just be fully electric. And it's not just about, okay, it's cool and it's new technology, but it's actually about choices, right? So going back to how can we create a healthier society? How can I, as a consumer, make a choice to say, right, I'm going to pay quite a bit of money to get a fully electric car, even the car that I've got at the moment, so that I can actually reduce the emissions coming from my car when I'm driving, because actually there's a link between urban air pollution coming from motor vehicles and actually asthma in children, respiratory illnesses. So again, this is how I see everything interlinked, that this fascination with technology, even if you are working in a car company, if you're working in a car company and that car company is trying to electrify its models for the future, you're making a contribution to human health, even though you just think, I work in a car company.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Listen, I could talk to you forever, but I'm going to finish on. I love gadgets, and you love gadgets. I affectionately think of you as our own Inspector Gadget.
Yeah.
No, you're inspecting what's going on out there. So, can you tell me what's your current favourite gadget?
My current favourite gadget, I have to think about that quite hard, Maria.
That's a hard question, isn't it? I'll tell you what my current favourite gadget is, and we are advertising recklessly on this particular episode. I love the AirPods, the Apple AirPods. I don't hear very well anymore. I'm getting older, and I find with the AirPods I hear really well. I don't end up getting tangled up with my leads, which I always used to, and I can move away from my phone, and I love them. I think they're fantastic. So that's my favourite gadget of this year.
So I would have to say the favorite gadget is one I've been testing and sharing my insights on. It's basically a Flow. It's the world's first personal air pollution sensor. And I put it on my belt when I go out, and I've tried measuring the pollution on the airplane, at the gate in the airport. I've tried it in different cities. I've tried it at home. I've tried it in my car. I've tried it in hotels. At conferences. And again, this is not necessarily independently validated in terms of the science behind it, but what it's just as a mechanism, so instead of me relying upon a general app saying pollution in your city is low this today, I'm able to get insights about, or actually data about, what's the pollution around me right now. So luckily I don't have any respiratory problems, but if I did, it's about me as a consumer, as a citizen in society, using this technology to be able to make informed choices. So if this sensor tells me, and let's just say I'm pregnant, I've got some respiratory problems, and I use the sensor to be able to say, right, should I go for a walk right now? And it says the pollution right now is high. I can think, actually, my unborn baby, myself, I'm not going to go for a walk on this busy main road now, because this data is telling me the pollution level is high right now, this second, and what type of pollution is high. So again, that's what about this technology is allowing us, hopefully, if it's used correctly, it allows us to make informed choices.
Wow, on that note, that's fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing. Maneesh, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Maria.